All right, good morning, everybody. It is a new week, and we start the last part of Unit 3, which is civil rights. And we'll do this in two parts just to make sure we get it in the time frame. So, Part 1A, and we'll start with definitions and get us into this. So, civil rights, so we need to know what they are. What they are policies designed to protect people against arbitrary or discriminatory treatment by government officials or individuals. So it's something, it's make sure that we understand the difference. We have to make sure the difference is known here because this involves specific government action. That's why we separate it. Remember, civil liberties is about the things that prohibit government action. Civil rights are things that involve government actually doing something. So that's the major difference, and we'll see another major difference here in a minute. So that's the idea. Remember, it's not the same. Civil rights and civil liberties, that's why we do them separately. But it still goes back to the 14th Amendment. There it is in its entirety now. We've already dealt with that first part, right? Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. We've dealt with that. That is the civil liberties part. And we've made that, hopefully, we made that really clear. Remember, that's the individual protections in the Bill of Rights applied to the states, and the states are compelled to follow national requirements once it's incorporated, right? So we've got civil liberties, 14th Amendment, due process, incorporation. Well, now we have it as different, and you have to know that they are different. The civil rights portion uses the Equal Protection Clause, that second clause over on the right, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. So it protects members of groups from discrimination by the states or sometimes by individuals. So that's the difference, right? So the top one, civil liberties, is civil liberties, 14th Amendment due process. This is civil rights, 14th Amendment equal protection. Okay, you have to know that that's the difference and what that difference is. That's a must, absolute must. Okay, so let's talk about equality. This is just rhetorical on this slide, right? We have when we say equal protection, right? We have ideas of equality. All men are created equal. That comes out of the Declaration of Independence. But when we say equality, what do we mean? Do we mean equality of opportunity, equality of outcome, equality of results, equality of rewards, those kind of things? That's the idea. What do we really mean? So let's start with a look at the Constitution, right? So what does it say? There's nowhere in the Bill of Rights or in the original Constitution that mentions anything about equality. Okay? However, it is then guaranteed in the 14th Amendment, one of the Civil War amendments. And we dealt with that, right? The equal protection of laws. We just saw that. So, what does it really mean? And we're going to have to interpret this. Does it mean equal protection of life, liberty, and property, right? The natural laws, um, or the natural rights of John Locke, right? Pretty much put into the Declaration. Here's where we start. Over the last 100 years or so, it has become the vehicle, the equal protection of the 14th Amendment, equal protection in the 14th Amendment, has become the vehicle the court has used to fight discrimination. And that's kind of where we're going to start. So the first idea, though, is discrimination permissible? And we're talking about, like, say, by government, by the state, whatever. Is discrimination permissible? And the answer is, maybe surprisingly, yes, it is permissible. But you say, what about equal protection? Well, this is how we get to it. All right, we have three standards of scrutiny that you need to know. Okay, and so you need to understand these. And we start with the lowest level. It's called reasonable. And the idea is if it's reasonable, if the discrimination is reasonable, it is constitutional. Okay? So here's the idea in more legal terms. Does the discrimination bear a rational relationship to a legitimate government purpose? Okay? Is it rational? Is it reasonable? And we'll give you an example, limiting the vote to 18 and over. Yes, 17 and younger, when we're talking about voting, that is discrimination. It is. They are discriminated against, but it is reasonable. Okay? It bears a rational relationship to a legitimate government purpose, that only adults can vote. Okay? That is reasonable. So that's the lowest level. The thing is, it can't be arbitrary. It can't be willy-nilly. It can't be out there. It has to have a rational relationship to a legitimate purpose. Okay, then we're going to skip to the highest level of scrutiny, then we'll do the middle one. So we just did the lowest level, now the highest level. It's called inherently suspect. This is where racial and ethnic classifications, racial and ethnic discrimination fall under. If there is a law out there that discriminates based on race or ethnicity, it is automatically thought of as unconstitutional, presumed to be invalid unless, in the words of the court, compelling public interest. Okay? And you're going to see, well, wait a minute, what do you mean racial or ethnic classifications or discrimination? Well, you'll see in a second, right? The burden of proof, if there is something there, it is inherently suspect, it is inherently unconstitutional, and the state's got to prove it's necessary for it to be allowed. And what this falls under is what falls under this is affirmative action, because affirmative action and quotas and things like that are absolutely racial classifications or racial segregation, that kind of thing, right? So it has to serve a compelling government purpose for it to be allowed. And we will talk about that. It'll be in the third day of notes, but we will talk about where affirmative action happens and what the relevant laws and things are. Okay, because it is inherently discriminatory. There has to be, that government has to prove it's necessary. All right, so then the middle one, so we've got reasonable, and we've got inherently suspect, and in the middle we call it intermediate, so it's nice that it sits in the middle, and that is where we find what we call gender classifications. And they begin with the idea they're not presumed unconstitutional or constitutional. You just go from there, and we'll get there. I think next time around we will talk about, so on Thursday, we will talk about, I think, some of those where gender classifications are, where their gender discrimination is allowed. Okay, and we'll see that. Okay, and it must bear a substantial relationship to an important legislative purpose. And we will get to that when we get there. All right, so that's it for the first half. I'll do a second one for the second half. We'll talk a little bit about history. We get to our case, and then we'll be done with the lecture portion for today. So we'll see you